Welcome to Leominster Access Television and Neighborhood Snapshot. My name is Bob Sardelli. I am a member of the Leominster Historical Commission. Today we're pleased to welcome three guests, three fine ladies familiar to many of you in the LATV audience. Three sisters, the Becrellis sisters, and former employees many years ago of the Boston Confectionery store, the famous BC of days gone by in downtown Leominster. So I want to welcome, and I'm going to get this in the order, Helen Becrellis Gamache.
All right.
Welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
Kitty Becrellis Bellotta. Welcome, Kitty.
Nice to be here.
And Pat Becrellis Parthia. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you.
Now, we're going to do a little biographical information before we get into details about the BC. These fine ladies grew up they were children and teens in the late 30s and early 1940s. And they grew up, their home was at the corner of Pleasant and Adams Street. And there were 6 sisters, all girls. And why don't we go right back to, this is really an American success story. We'll go back to your dad coming to America. So why don't we start with Helen? Tell us about where did your dad emigrate from? He became an immigrant from?
Yeah, he came from Greece, Mytilene, which was a small island right off the coast of Greece.
And did he come with another relative? Was there?
Yeah, he was brought over with his cousin, I think.
Okay.
James
Moskos.
James Moskos, who we'll mention later on.
Right.
They went into business
Together, right.
And what do you remember? What year they came, approximately?
No.
I don't know, 1912?
I don't know.
A long time ago.
Yeah, right.
And did your dad and his cousin come right to Leominster?
No.
No.
Where Kitty. I'm going audience by. We're going by.
Careful.
Yeah, watch what you say.
I have to watch what I say because Helen may have her sisters start singing in a few minutes. They have a very good sense of humor, and we may have to stop mid-program to have a snack break. Kitty, where did your dad and his cousin, where did they come from originally when they came from Greece?
They went to Framingham because their Uncle Schoolos ran a restaurant in Framingham.
Okay. And so from Greece to Framingham, and then Pat from Framingham to
Fitchburg, Leominster area.
Fitchburg, Leominster area. And during that time, your mom was probably growing up on Lincoln Terrace, right?
That's right.
And she was a member of, her background was French.
Right.
And how did, now we're getting closer to the BC, but not yet. Your mom and dad did meet at the BC. So your dad got into, and your dad and your uncle
Right.
Cousin.
got into the restaurant business in Leominster. Now I have from the 1934 Leominster Directory, and these Leominster Street Directories, which are still put out today, but they're precious and invaluable to historians. And I'm looking back at the 1934 Leominster Directory, and there's a listing for the Boston Confectionery store, Becrellis and Moskos, proprietors, 20 Monument Square. And 20 Monument Square, for people new to Leominster, it's where Friendly's in downtown Leominster is now. It's
That vacant space
that vacant
between,
spot.
plus a little bit of friendly.
And a little bit of Friendly's. So that area, that neck of the woods downtown in Monument Square. And they started, now what, do you remember what year they started the restaurant? It was operating in the 30s.
Well, it must have been early. They were all in business around 50 years, so.
So they were in
must have
business
early
for
19.
50 years. And
This says 1913.
I was going to say, before World War II, World War I.
wow.
That's what they're,
And Pat, could you read the caption on? Pat is reading from the excellent. Pat, could you hand that to
Surely.
me for a
I
moment?
have one if you want.
Okay. This is the excellent Images of America, Leominster. This was Thomas Tucker Hazard and Diane Sanabria. Introduction by Robert Cormier. And this was put out a few years ago by the Leominster Historical Society, and it's one in a series of towns. Excellent, excellent book. And this is the precursor to the new excellent
new one,
Leominster history book,
Evans.
Combing Through Leominster. But in this one, and I'll just read the caption, there's a picture of the BC, which we're not going to put up on the monitor yet, but we'll put up probably the very same picture. The Boston Confectionery store, located at 20 Monument Square, was a thriving business and a Leominster tradition for over 40 years. Greek-American owners Becrellis and Moskos opened the store in 1913, as Pat said, and served a variety of candies, sweets, nuts, and ice cream. And I know that in the audience, some of the people who used to frequent the BC, their mouths are maybe watering now because it was noted for the sweets and the ice cream. In 1952, the BC, as it was known, was sold to Louis Delakiai and Carter Kalustian. It was completely destroyed along with 8 other businesses in a spectacular fire in 1956. The business never reopened. So that's a little thumbnail sketch from this excellent book of the BC. So your dad and your mother, the restaurant opens. But before we get to the opening of the restaurant, well, we have to get to that first. Your mom is living and growing up on
Lincoln
Terrace, and your dad and his
Jimmy.
and Jimmy opened the BC way back when in 1913, and then your dad meets your mom. Where did your dad meet your mom? Helen.
I want to say at the store.
At the store, at the restaurant.
She worked there.
She was working at the restaurant, and they courted. In those days, we call it dating today. They courted, and they eventually, he proposed. They got married, and where did they live at first, Kitty?
They bought a home on Hale
Hale
Street.
Hale
in
Street
Leominster.
in Leominster, up on the west side.
On the west side, yes.
Okay, but then your mom eventually said that they had
It was
to,
too lonesome up there.
too lonesome
She
because
had one child or two children at the time. She says, find me a house downtown. So I could go walking downtown easily, and you could come home for lunch or whatever. So that's what they did.
Then they moved downtown to the corner of
Pleasant and Adams.
Pleasant and Adams. So that's where you girls pretty much
Yes.
grew up.
Yeah.
And you were saying that there were 6 girls,
Right.
all girls. And now this so typical of America, Greek Americans, and there's a French, that this marriage is French and Greek, and like so many immigrants coming in, the Italians did it, the Irish, the French, today where all of the nationalities intermarry, we're Americans. We're a culture, a society made up of, that's one of the things that makes us great. But in those days, how was it for a person of Greek ancestry to marry someone of French ancestry? Whose turn?
Well, my mother used to say that she wasn't too welcome by the Greek community because they expected my father to marry a Greek. So for about a year, she said they sort of gave her the cold shoulder, and then finally they grew to accept her, and then it was just fine.
It was just fine. And that isn't just with the Greek and
I'm
French,
sure.
that's with every
Oh,
group.
yes, of
That's the way the
course.
Italians were, that's everybody. And then when people get to know each other, hey, they're just people. And, so I know that Greek people, as they should be, are very proud of their language. So I imagine you 3 ladies are going to start speaking to me in Greek in a moment, right?
Takanis.
Right, yeah.
Wait a minute. Now, all right. So wait a minute. Tell me about that. We were talking about that. Helen. why did you girls learn Greek?
We were supposed to learn Greek, and we took lessons from the Greek priest, and all we did was fool around him because he had a beard. We never saw anybody with a beard.
And you little girls at the time, you girls had never seen anyone with a beard, and you would
Just laugh and play. He didn't have a chance.
so you never learned Greek,
No.
and which I'll bet you wish you knew Greek
Yeah,
today,
right,
just as I wish I had learned Italian. And you know, it's wonderful to speak more than one language, to be bilingual, but. That's the way it goes when, you know, in America we become fully Americanized. But it's wonderful because that's our English is happens to be the language. But it's good to know other languages too. We should be proud of our heritage and want to speak other languages. But one of the things that glues us together as a society is English. So you're not gonna. This is not going to be Greek to me at this.
The four oldest.
I keep looking at Helen because she's kind of wise, in a nice way. In a nice way, and maybe we'll have our snack break.
The four oldest girls went to Greece with my mother and father.
Yes.
Oh,
I should have brought the
Yeah.
pillow.
So
Oh, I know. I thought of it
the
too.
pillow.
We have a pillow that our niece had made for us, and it's a picture of mother and father
Oh, yeah.
and the four oldest girls. Helen was a baby then, as they prepared to leave on ship to go to Greece.
That was our
It was a
passport picture.
Right.
Yeah, it's
that
nice.
must,
Yeah.
oh, I wish you had.
I wish I brought it. It's nice.
Now you girls worked at the restaurant, and we're going to
yeah.
put in a moment. We're going to put the restaurant up for the benefit of the viewing audience. So at 20 Monument Square, but you girls really, everybody had a job. Everybody had to pitch in. What were some of your jobs, both at home and at the restaurant? Now, I know at home when you had to wrap kisses, the candy kisses. Tell me something about that.
He would come home.
Your dad would come home.
Yeah, and say, I need kiss wrappers today. And we all had to go down the store and wrap kisses. And I mean, kisses was one thing. That wasn't too bad to do. But caramels, oh my goodness gracious.
The caramels were little squares,
Yeah,
so
and
you
you-
had to fold.
Fold them over and everything. Hated it.
So that's just one indication that you girls really had to work.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
And what were some of the, now when did you start working at the restaurant when you started, about what age? Just, you wrapped kisses at home, and I imagine when
No,
you got
we
Not
went
at home.
home.
We did it at the
at
store.
the store,
At
you
the
came down to the
restaurant, yeah.
store.
Oh, yeah.
But,
We had a regular candy kitchen out back.
in the candy kitchen.
Yeah.
What were some of the, and I know I'm skipping around somewhat, but what were some of the, now the BC, and it's on our monitor now. As I recall, I remember it as, I vaguely remember, and this must have been in the 50s, early 50s, I remember the front had a tile entrance, and I remember going in, and it was a long store
Yes.
from front to back. And what was on the right side? And then
The soda fountain.
The soda fountain was on the right
Right, yeah.
side.
Yeah, and then there
And-
was a candy case on the left, several candy cases.
On the left.
Yeah.
And it was not only confectionery things, but it was a full restaurant. You
Right.
could get
Regular meals.
regular meals.
The back part of the last half of the business was all booths for restaurant service.
For the restaurant service. And at that time, now we have chain restaurants coming into town. We have long-standing restaurants in town, Monty's and the Gondola, and I don't want to. And many Italian restaurants. I'm not going to go through all of them. But downtown Leominster at that time, in the 30s, the 20s, 30s,
30s, 40s.
40s, into the 50s, there were Goodhue's, Monty's, the BC, and you had mentioned another one, and I remember the name
Conchetta's.
Conchetta's. And
Conchetta's.
where,
The Bonton.
Oh, yeah, Bonton.
the Bonton
was down there.
Yeah, it was
wow.
Bonton
That was
was
a
past
long
the
Just before the lights.
Brockmans.
okay,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we're neglecting
right.
some, but the restaurants downtown, it isn't like today where you could hop in your car and go to the outskirts of town. In those days, pretty much people walked or
Right.
took the trolley or the bus, and it was a big deal sometimes to get downtown. And what was the big? What were the days downtown when things were really busy? There were no malls.
No
Thursday,
more.
Friday, Saturday were the,
Thursday was the big night downtown because
Saturday
that was
Payday.
payday. The factories, I think Leominster was Thursday night, and I think Fitchburg was Friday night.
Right.
And Saturday night was
It was
big.
open for a long time on Saturday nights.
Saturday
yeah.
night, and what was the other day?
Friday. Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Thursday,
Those
Friday,
three.
and Saturday. And that was a time also when we had the restaurants downtown and a number of diners, and we had the movie houses.
Right.
Do you remember the Plymouth Theater, the Metropolitan
Metropolitan,
Theater,
Rialto.
the Rialto
Rialto.
Theater, the Capitol, which I don't remember, but that was over, I think, on Pleasant
Street.
Street,
Pleasant Street.
Yeah.
near where there's
The barber shops
with
there.
the barber shop, Roland's, formerly Roland's, and now Rob's barber shop is. So there's that parking lot, and I think it was
Right, that's
right
right
there.
there.
And then later there was a bar room there too. I think McCann's.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, yeah.
At that spot. So there have been so many changes in Leominster, but so it was a full service restaurant and also noted for its candies
Oh,
and,
ice cream,
and
yeah.
confections.
And ice cream and everything.
Ice creams.
Ice creams.
Homemade
Sundays.
ice cream.
Ice creams. Homemade. Homemade. Did you girls ever have a part in making the ice cream?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
You did that.
We used to help package it for takeout.
Yeah.
What were some of the? I know the vanilla and so on, but were there any special flavors? Mine is pistachio. Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah, pistachio, maple walnut.
Yeah.
It wasn't just
Coffee.
the ice cream, though. I mean, just the ice cream itself. It was the sundaes. There were a number
yeah.
of Sundays that, to this day, I could walk into one of the supermarkets and somebody will say, I remember the BC, I wish I could have a BC special like we used to have. And they remember some of the Sundays that were served.
I'm not sure, but I talked to my aunt recently, my Aunt Teresa, and I think she may have mentioned the Sunday as being something in
yeah.
the BC. Yeah, I wish I could have. I didn't get out of my neighborhood very much. I was in a different era. What were some of the other jobs you ladies had? Did you waitress? Did you actually
Oh, yes.
waitress?
Oh, yeah, we waited on tables.
And you waited on tables.
Tables, right.
And worked behind the counter sometimes,
Oh, yes.
scooping out ice cream because it was bulk ice cream.
Yeah, and
Yeah, and we worked out back, wrapping kisses, doing caramels.
My
Christmas
sister
candy.
my sister Alice did a lot of the chocolate dipping.
Dipping.
Her
She
and
was very good at it.
Messina Moscas, she dipped the chocolates also.
ah,
It was an art. I tried it. I wasn't good, but my
Now-
sister Alice was good and Messina very good.
were there any Greek specialties like baklava or anything like that, or was it
No,
just
not really.
confection?
Greek rice pudding.
Greek
the
rice.
One day a
the
week
rice-
they'd make the Greek rice pudding, and there was a group that came in regularly for it. And a lot of his cooking had a Greek tendency.
Yeah.
His island was very close to Turkey, and there was an influence of using tomato in the food. So many of the things that he would cook that the American people would not put tomato in, he would put tomato in. So he liked beef stew and roast beefs and so forth. It was different.
It was.
Very well liked.
All sounds good.
It
All
was
sounds
good. It was good.
When do we eat?
Yeah, and back of the restaurant was the
Candy store.
no, where they
The
cooked.
kitchen.
Oh,
Yeah.
the kitchen, yeah.
Kitchen. Then there was a long porch, and then back in one of the other stores where the candy was all made. Was two
Yeah.
big rooms
Yeah.
where we made the
Yeah.
It,
candy.
it was behind what?
The men's store?
shop and Costello's.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there was a porch that went right behind them, and then we'd go into the candy kitchen.
Now, I remember the men's shop because that was operating, that was the a clothing store for men.
Yeah.
And what was Costello's?
Was
Like a CVS.
CVS or something
Yeah,
like
that
that,
sort of-
yeah.
So
This
that was,
Coke
and I
like
think
that,
I think I may have seen some old photographs with
Yeah.
the sign, you
Yeah,
know,
right.
of
Yeah,
that.
right. Yeah.
It's fascinating to look at these old photographs of Leominster. In downtown, now in our little talk out in the waiting room, you had mentioned sometimes Christmas dinner in your family was
Delayed.
delayed. Now, why was that? Let's go in reverse. We'll go Pat.
Well,
and then
there
we'll
were a
go Kitty.
number of elderly gentlemen mostly that lived downtown in a single room and didn't have the services for cooking or anything. And my dad always wanted to make sure that they would have a Christmas dinner. So he would go down to the restaurant Christmas morning and open up for an hour or so that they could all come and have a Christmas dinner. So
wonderful.
at home, we waited until that was over, and
Thanksgiving,
he'd come home for our dinner.
So very good-hearted.
Yes,
Oh,
it
yeah.
was.
Parents.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
The the Salvation Army used to have a large band, like a 5-piece band, and
Yeah,
what,
right.
Kitty.
They did. They played right there near Woolworths,
Woolworths,
right
yeah.
next to my father's store. And
In Woolworths, I remember Woolworths
Right
was the
next door.
chain store,
Right.
and Woolworths was in that section,
Right
and the
next to the
5 and
store.
10 was further down, right? Which
No,
one was the
Woolworths
5 and
was
10?
five
Woolworths
and
was
10.
was the 5 and 10.
5 and
Was
10,
the 5 and 10.
and Newberry's
was
Was
further
further
down
down.
near my
Further down.
uncle's store.
Near the fruit store.
Okay, so those two, I remember those two stores. So Woolworths was the 5 and 10.
10,
right.
That was the nickname. And now they're I mean, there is no Woolworths
No.
anymore nationally, that chain, and I guess Newberry's.
Gone.
But those names of those stores will bring back memories, fond memories
Oh,
to
yeah.
many of people in the viewing audience. There have been so many changes downtown and in Leominster as a whole.
And Dad lived close enough that he'd walk home. He didn't take the car.
Yeah.
But on the nights that the Salvation Army little band was going to play out front, my mother used to make him take the car and park it in front of the store. And then we'd walk down later on and sit in the car and listen to the Salvation Army band.
Army was that's sweet, really. It really is. Days gone by, how,
Yes.
things,
Yeah, right.
how things have changed. When you were, now your dad, you were saying when you girls would buy clothes and things, when you got old enough, he'd have you line up and he would, now what about, what's that? Helen?
We'd have to try our clothes on and do a show for him to show us what we had bought.
He had to approve of the,
Well, not actually approved, but because my mother had taken us.
Yeah.
But just to show him what we had
So-
bought, and our new fashions.
new fashions.
Well, a lot of times he would come with us, and the ones that weren't getting clothes that day would go with my father and have a treat. So we always wanted to go with him. We'd go to Worcester, Fitchburg, or wherever.
The shop.
Yeah.
And there were many places right in downtown Leominster
Leominster
where you
that we
could shop.
did,
And
yeah,
probably, I'll
absolutely.
bet that your
Allen's.
parents frequent Allen's or Rubens even.
Yeah,
Sometimes
the
Rubens.
Vogue
Vogue shop.
The
The
Vogue.
Vogue.
All
Yeah.
of those, all of those
Lubin's.
places.
Murphy.
Lubin's. I remember I bought
Lubin's.
some clothes.
Blanche
I frequented
Proof.
Rubin's
Yeah.
many times, and Lubin's too. I used to shop in there. The downtown, when your mom and dad used to go out and eat on certain nights, and of course they would eat at the BC, but when they were to go out to eat, now, where would they, when they'd go to a movie, they'd sometimes go to
King's Corner,
King's Corner.
up in North Leominster, Monty's,
Montes.
different places, just for something different than
Then
eating at home, so to speak, at the
eat, right,
BC.
because restaurant was like eating at home. And what about, one of you said you remembered in Monty's, I think it may have been Helen, that you remember at Monty's, one of the members of the Montagna family way back.
The grandmother.
The
The
grandmother.
grandmother used to
Lived
come
on-
in the store all the time. I could picture
Was that
his
Mrs. Montagna?
Mrs.
Way back.
Montagna.
And this is very current because Monty's is going to soon
Right.
no longer be at that location, which is sad. That's one of the icons of Leominster.
Definitely.
You know, and hopefully they'll. The younger generation of the family will. We don't know what's going to happen, but
Right.
they've served Leominster so well for so many years. And it's sad because now the chain restaurants are coming in.
Yeah,
We
right.
still have a number of family restaurants in Leominster that are still doing well, and we hope that they're going to be patronized because there's wonderful food. But it's kind of hard to fight the advertising, the national advertising of the chains that are coming in.
The difference being you go to Monty's and you can sit quietly and have a dinner. You go to the chains and the noise is
It's
just...
difficult.
Yeah,
And the food is so much better.
yeah.
Really,
well,
it's like
it's
a place
really
it's
home
homemade.
cooked,
That's
and,
home cooked.
Yeah, really. Big difference.
And I think while I don't want to leave anybody out, while I'm at it, and I apologize beforehand for leaving any out, but I'm going to go down the Manja Mile if I can. Let's see. There's Monty's, there's the Gondola.
No,
El
Camino.
But the gondola is over at on Lancaster
Lancaster
Street.
Street,
That's
yeah.
still
Right.
it used to be the Lazy A.
Yes.
Yeah.
El Camino,
Christina's.
Christina's,
Cornerstones.
Cornerstones,
And Lydios.
and
And
Lydios. And if I apologize to the proprietors of all of those restaurants if I have inadvertently left any of them out, but people new to Leominster, you're blessed with some wonderful. Maddie's. Over
that's
on
Maddie's, yeah.
Lancaster Street,
Right.
and so I hope I haven't left any out. But there are many, and there are other restaurants too
Sure.
that aren't large, chain restaurants. But
Right.
we're blessed.
Yeah.
So, so on Thursday night would be the movie. Your mom and dad would perhaps take in a movie, and then they'd go to some other of these places like Monty's.
Well,
and we were just saying, you remember Mrs. Montagna? That's how we got into Monty's way back.
Yeah, it would be their great-grandparents.
Great-grandparents. We're talking way back.
I can still picture her sitting on the stool. She always sat on the stool, never in a booth, always on the stool. And
At Monty's and
at the opera restaurant, yeah,
the
the
BC.
BC.
oh, at the BC.
That's why my dad would take us to Monty's sometimes, because they were always,
so they would say they'd come
Yeah,
they'd come
right.
over to there, and they'd
Yeah, right,
very
yeah.
interesting. They'd.
Right, yeah.
What else was downtown like at that time? It was a really
It was
booming.
friendly. It was nice.
It
you
was
know.
friendly. Leominster was a lot smaller in
Smaller,
population. It was so different.
Do you remember Fry's,
Fries, yeah?
an ice cream place across the street at Monument Square?
Yeah, right.
A few blocks down from Pleasant Street. And they used to have an ice cream that had a flat top. It was prefixed,
Yeah.
and I loved it. And my dad wasn't too happy when I would go over there and get an ice cream when he made the fresh ice
You're one of the competitors.
cream. Fries, yeah.
Right, yeah.
But what else? What were some of the other
Castellanos.
Castellano studio, which is right near
Yeah,
here,
right
which
near
was
here.
right near here.
Gloria Chain.
Gloria Chain.
Larry and them.
I have in the directory here another Bacrellis
Boston
at
Fruit.
15 Main Street,
Boston Fruit.
the Boston Fruit Store. Now, the Boston Confectionery, the BC, was at 20 Monument Square, but the Boston Fruit Store was at 15 Main Street. Now, whereabouts would that be located? That's downtown.
Yeah, near Newbury.
Just before,
Yeah, no
before
Right after the
Methodist
bank.
Haynes'
Church.
butter store.
Right now, it's right after the bank.
right.
For people new to Leominster, if you say the bank and you say the butter and egg store, what was the Ames? That's
Yeah, Kennedy's or whatever.
Kennedy's. But what would be near there now? There's a
The
bank
parking
building still.
space.
There's a
The
parking
parking
lot,
space.
and there's
That's
a
where it was.
drive-through.
Right.
That's where it would all been, right
It
through
would have
there.
been in
that
that
area,
area,
yes.
and that was a relative had
Our uncle, my
your
father's
uncle.
brother,
Emmanuel.
had
Emmanuel.
a fruit store
Fruit store,
there.
right.
Yes.
Okay, so there were all these little shops and all these little businesses downtown. Can you think of anything else about connected to the BC?
We'd be amiss if we didn't bring up Annie Comiskey's name, because Annie worked for my father for
Years.
almost as long as the store was open.
Yep.
She was a wonderful person. She lived on Middle Street many years ago, and she was a good friend. She was a good
Annie
worker.
Comiskey. So
Annie
Annie-
He
Comiskey,
worked
yes.
there a long time.
And that will trigger memories, I'm sure, for many people.
Right, yeah.
And I'm wondering whether she was any relation to the policeman.
Yes, that was
Yes.
her brother.
Her brother.
Yes.
Yeah, that was her brother,
officer, and
Leo.
I think he
Leo.
may have become a lieutenant or a captain
Yeah, right,
in the
yeah.
police force. But I think they lived. I think a Comiskey family. When I was little, I grew up at 166 Central Street, and there was a 3-decker next to us. And at one point, I remember a Comiskey family living there, and it may have been the.
I think it was the police.
The
wasn't it?
police-
I think so,
police
because they
officer.
lived on, Annie lived, and her sister lived on Middle Street.
Street.
The family home was a
Okay.
3-decker.
Okay, so the 3-decker heritage of.
Right, yeah.
I lived in the Ned Zereno Perla's house, and later Henry and Christine Perla. But my parents rented there, and I lived there for 43 years. And wonderful memories, of the wonderful landlords, all of those people. But the Comiskeys were next
You're right.
next door. In the booths, my neighbors and the Piemonteses and the Corlises. Through the years, many people came in, and the Testas, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a number of them. Can you think of, in growing up in Leominster, some other memories other than the restaurant? Those years, one of the recollections that many people who grew up in Leominster remember in the 30s, 38, the 36 flood and the 38 hurricane. Do you have any reminiscences of that? Because you were here then.
The flood was on March 18th because it was my birthday. And
that was in 1936,
yeah,
right?
That's right. And I remember I was supposed to have a birthday party, and the cake was in the closet waiting for, but the rain kept coming, and we thought because they were afraid the dam at Rockwell's would break, we were asked to leave, so we went up to Lincoln Terrace to our grandmother's and spent the time up there.
And from the restaurant or from your home?
From the home.
From the home.
Pleasant
Because
Street.
I've seen a picture of water running through
Right to
downtown
downtown.
Leominster
Oh, yes.
Oh,
during the
yes.
flood. I
Yeah.
mean, there was water.
Yeah, right.
Well, there was the brook behind
Right,
there.
the
right.
Monusnaug
That's
Brook.
right,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
That would flood, and then downtown would be flooded. And that was a regional flood. That was a huge flood of all of, I guess, New England. And
Yes.
And in that one, the Hamilton Street Dam went, and there was a fatality. And the new, at the time, it was the new Sawtell Bridge at the bottom of Rice Hill.
Oh,
went.
yes.
And that was the Sawtell Bridge was the replacement for the old Red Bridge. And that was washed out in the flood of 36. The beautiful bridge, but the construction was not, the engineering was not the type of bridge, it was an arched bridge. That went out, and then the bridge that's there now at the bottom of Rice Hill is slated for replacement. So we've had a lot of things happen in Leominster. What about the 1938 hurricane? What are your recollections of that?
Oh, I can remember
Helen?
the wind blowing terrible. My dad was going out on the porch.
Yes.
He had to hang on to the screen door. We thought he was going to be blown away.
And we'd look down Pleasant Street, and you could see one
oh,
tree
yeah,
after
one tree
the other
after
going
another.
over. It was scary.
But all 6 survived, and everybody survived. But the hurricane of 38 is something that is etched into the people in
Oh,
Leominster
yes, oh, yes.
who,
All the damage that was
who
done.
lived through
We
that
were
period.
very fortunate.
Any other reminiscences, ladies? Anything you want to say as we near the end of this interview?
Tidbits from the BC.
Tidbits.
I can remember every time you'd go from the back to the front or from the front to the back, you didn't go empty-handed. You took a tray of candy and refilled it and brought it back. And to this day, when my husband goes to do something, I'll say, "Don't go empty-handed," and that's from my dad.
From your training way
making a trip,
back.
you would carry something. I can remember also when I first started waiting tables that I was young. I mean, they didn't have the age rules that they had now. And my father, I found out later, would go by and put a quarter on the table as a tip so that I wouldn't feel badly if I didn't get any tips.
Now, Pat, that gets me to the prices in those days. Like, what would have been a tip for a big BC ice cream sundae or banana split? What would
A tip might have been a nickel because I don't think the BC
yeah,
cost
right.
more than 25, 35 cents for the whole ice cream.
for the whole ice cream? So if you got a tip like a nickel, that was because of inflation, and prices. Nickel bought a lot more in those days.
Right.
Wages were much lower. We were talking about probably people who were working in hourly wage or weekly wage in the shops, factories at maybe, I don't know, $12 a week or $15.
That was a big part of his
perhaps.
business at lunchtime, because the factories weren't that far from downtown.
Right, we're walking
They would
distance.
come up for lunch and go to the BC for lunch, and it was quick.
Right. And these the factories. If you picture the factories in those days around
Around
Leominster,
town,
That's
they
right.
they were very close to
Close
downtown.
downtown,
Yeah,
right.
And today there are some of these aging buildings that you see
Right.
that are being reconverted. But at one time, those were booming,
sure.
bustling factories,
Right.
and they would come down
That's
to
right.
various establishments for lunch. Did you? What changes have you observed? This is a general question to all three of you. What changes have you observed in the ways citizens of Leominster today make a living compared to then?
Well, a lot of them back then were factory workers of some sort. I think now there's a lot more different type businesses that people are involved with.
and non-factory businesses, a lot of
More
service and
more
professional
professionals.
businesses. In those days, you could work, and we need factory workers.
Of course,
We-
of
you know,
course.
But in those days, you could make a good living and raise a family.
Right.
Because of the wages and so on, and the cost of living, working in a factory, in a trade. My dad was a machinist, skilled machinist, die make things like that,
Right.
tool and die, and raised our family, and you know,
Absolutely.
and worked very, very hard. And he was very skilled at what he did. But you could do that in those days. Now the cost of living, and we have people in the economy having to work 2 and 3 jobs. But other jobs are coming in. We're at a period of other jobs taking over, although we are outsourcing a lot of jobs to other
Yes.
countries. So things have changed. But things still always work out. We have to still be very, very positive. What is your fondest memory? And I'll ask each one of you, of growing up in Leominster. What is your fondest memory? And that's hard. You have so many. What is your fondest memory of growing up in Leominster? Now, I know probably Helen has some, not only with her family, but her career in nursing. Kitty in bringing up her, how many children?
11.
11 children, so many fond memories there. And Pat, your career as an educator in Leominster and at the Leominster High School and the athletics and in the Girls Athletic Association and a guidance counselor. So maybe it could be one of those, but in addition to those, what are some of the other fondest memories? That's kind of an unfair question. I should have keyed you into that earlier, but
All right.
it can be, I'll put it this way, what was one of your fondest memories on short notice of growing up in Leominster? Other than this interview, Helen, but not getting a
Touche.
snack.
One
Have to
memory.
think about
I'm not sure either.
I don't know. The only thing I can remember, my dad was so generous to people. I mean, he always thought of the other people that didn't have the stuff. And I can remember him coming home from work with probably a quarter beef stew to give to the neighbors
And that's
because they didn't have the food.
because of the Depression years.
right,
Right.
right,
We
right.
didn't. I didn't make that point specifically,
right,
but
right.
the
We didn't know
span-
what the Depression was.
The span of the BC
Yeah, right.
covered the Depression years. So your dad was generous, and your
Yeah.
mom and dad were generous to your neighbors and to the fellows downtown who didn't have a
Right, yeah,
meal.
right.
You know, at Christmas time, make sure that they would get served first. Rough times, the Depression, but you
sure.
didn't know that you were
Well, that's just it. We didn't realize it was that bad because we had everything.
right. And so many of the people who grew up in the Depression, those were hard years in many ways, but they were very wonderful years in many ways because of the closeness
Yes.
of
Yeah, right,
families,
true.
and you didn't know you were, you know, there was poverty, but it was kind of a mixed blessing.
Right.
That's come through. And, you know, there was. You had to work, and you had to grow very often. Did you grow any of your own food at home? Did you have a garden or anything like that?
Oh, my father had a little mini garden
Mini.
until they moved many years later up on Academy Road, and they moved up there so he could finally have a big garden.
But he was probably so busy with the restaurant and so on, he didn't have time for that. But many families, to supplement,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh, yeah.
food supply, would grow things during that time.
When we moved up on Academy Road, I can remember, and he planted his, so to speak, first garden. And it had never been, the soil had never been used before, so the crop was beautiful. And I can remember him getting a green pepper as big as that, and he brought it down to the BC and put it up on top of the
He was
dishes.
so proud
He was
of it.
so proud of what he had grown.
Kitty, any one of your fondest memories?
Well, I don't know. I just feel so blessed. I've had such a good life. You know, my dad. I had such a wonderful mother and father, and just blessed.
And that we all are, and that comes through the closeness of families in those days. And family is still that's the foundation of society.
Yeah, right.
Marriage and family, and so important. But in those days, they were very close, extended families. Because you mentioned, you know, your cousin and your uncle and
Right.
aunts and you know, Pat.
Well, lots of different little memories and everything, but in fairness to the family, our oldest sister, Frances, and then Alice and Irene, and the three of us, and we did a lot of things together. And we all worked at the business at different times, but nevertheless together. And as Kitty said, we're blessed to have had a good, close family that everything meant much to us.
And that's so true, and it shows with you ladies and your families. So nearing the conclusion of this interview, oh, by the way, Pat, did you have a couple of students, or did you have a student who, or two who...
Or two.
Well, I know you had many, but I mean, who have a connection to LATV, who might be here today?
Well, Carl. Carl Sally and his mother's a good friend of mine. And
and
Tina.
Tina, and did you have Jack as a?
yes, when I walked in, that's what he said. You were my guidance counselor.
Counselor,
I was
so-
at Leominster High School for 43 years.
43 years, and I remember when I went to Leominster High, you were
Phys ed.
phys ed,
Yep.
Mrs. Pothier, and you were the founder, I guess, of the Girls Athletic Association.
GAA, yes, very proud of that.
And you should be. And one of the things I remember was, speaking of those days, your emphasis on deportment and manners for the girls and proper etiquette and for the boys and girls and things
Right,
like that,
right.
which today is kind of
Do you remember my nickname? Lady.
lady, yes.
I did not want to be called coach. I just, for whatever reason, did not. And some girl picked up on. I came in dressed one day, and she said, "Look at the lady," and it stuck. And to this day, I walk downtown and I'll hear somebody
So
yell,
say,
"Lady!"
you wanna be lady, right?
I had very good years at Leominster.
Very good years, and Pat, very good years at Leominster High and in Leominster, and Kitty in Leominster, and with your wonderful family, and Helen with your nursing career.
Yeah, right.
And you also said that you were purchasing
Yeah, I was director of purchasing at the hospital.
at
For
Leominster,
years,
Leominster Hospital.
Yeah, retired there in 45 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So wonderful family, the McCrellis family, and your families that now that you married into, your families, and three wonderful ladies. And I want to thank these wonderful ladies for being part of our interview today and reminiscing about that iconic BC,
Yeah, right.
that spot, the Boston Confectionery store, the BC restaurant. And as always, I want to thank Kyle Pimarini, Jack Sully, Dennis Cormier, Tina Pimarini, and as always, you, the members of the LATV viewing audience. Thank you for turning in to Neighborhood Snapshot.